Here at Methven on Three Wise Men Day, which I think is quite funny. Tony Herlihy joins me. Firstly, Tony, welcome back.
Yeah, no, thanks very much.
We caught up the other night at the race with a very, very different atmosphere, but what a beautiful, picturesque, great day they got here at Methven.
Yeah, no, it's a lovely spot, and get a beautiful day like this it's great, you know, and the racing's always pretty good here.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful track. Three Wise Men. That's what the day is called. It's, I suppose, honouring the fact to yourself, Maurice McKendry and Ricky May, all passing 3,000 wins. You're at about 3,600 and something or other, but it's a mighty achievement.
Yeah, it is. You know, as we know, Chris Alford, he's driven 7,000, whatever, but we don't race, obviously, as much as what they do, but he's certainly a great driver as well, not taking anything away from that. But, yeah, probably back in the day we raced, I used to travel a bit more and drive a lot more when we were younger, and as you do. But, yeah, no, so it was a great achievement. I'm pretty proud of it, and yeah.
4,000 on the radar, like you know where you're at. Are you eyeing that off? I'm
not really eyeing it off, but yeah, I'll just keep ticking over, and I mainly drive my own horses now, a few outsiders of friends and nice horses, and I'm quite happy to keep ticking away there.
We're in the South Island, you live in the north. Whereabouts did you start?
Yeah, I started in the north, yeah. Always lived in, I started off in Pukekohe, yeah, just South Auckland sort of thing, and yeah, and kept there more or less. We're now out at Clevedon, which is South Auckland still, and yeah, train a few there. Got a 40-acre property there, and we train a few there, and I still drive a few.
How'd you get your start? Because, forgive my ignorance, but I mean, you're the only Herlihy I know in race, and your wife, I'll be into trouble there, but it's not a common name in harness racing over both sides of the ditch.
No, I had an uncle who was actually foreman for Roy Purdon when Roy was at Pukekohe, and in the school holidays I used to go and stay there, and I just got the feel for it, and it was, you know, just loved it right from the day one, really, working with the horses and helping out. And right from when I was going to school, then I used to just catch a rail car up to his property and stayed with my uncle and aunt, and yeah, and Roy Purdon was there then.
And you know, you've got a great association with the Purdons. It's been well known over the journey. But was that your first job with Roy? Did you leave school and start with Roy?
No, I left school and worked for my uncle. He ended up being a private trainer for a chap, and just across the road from where Roy's property was at that time, before Roy moved to Clevedon. And I worked for him for probably 8 to 10 years. Yeah, so just sort of working horses. He had a few nice horses. Only had a small team. So when I eventually went and worked for Roy a few years later, or just after probably 10 or 12 years later, when I drove a couple for him earlier on, I went and worked for Roy, and Mark was there. Mark was about 19 or 20 when we went there, and yeah, so and got to work with a lot more horses, and then we moved down to where Barry was, and we were working 70 or 80 horses back then. Yeah, so that was a big jump forward, and you learnt so much though with so many more horses.
Imagine you did. Just did you get your driving start with your uncle, or did you have to wait till you got to Roy's?
No, I drove as a junior driver when I was working for my uncle, and a chap across the road, Len Bayer, he actually gave me a lot of drives and was a big help to me and got me started. You know, as you know, you don't start off as being Maurice McKendry or the top driver or anything like that. So yeah, so it took a wee while, and we kicked away there, and he gave me a few opportunities and worked out good. I ended up driving some nice horses later on.
How tough was it to get started?
It's as tough as ever, yeah. Probably, to be fair, it was probably tougher back then, you know, because we had those older drivers all seemed to get the drives, and you got what was left if you could get one. And I used to get on the ballots in the junior drivers races back in those days trying to get a drive and all that thing. But you had to wait your turn, and which was good. I had some top drivers ahead of me with Owen Purdon and Barry Purdon were young drivers then in those days, and Maurice was there driving in those days, Maurice McKendry. So,
did you learn plenty off them? I suppose when you're hungry for it and you want to get out there and have a crack, did you learn plenty off them just probably watching, but then being able to actually go back and ask them why and how they did things?
Yeah, probably more watching than asking. You know, you sort of I watched the likes of Peter Wolfton and Tommy Knowles, and Tommy Knowles drove a lot for the trainer I was with at the time with Arnie Gadsby, and yeah, and he was a top driver as well, and they were very astute horsemen back in those days, as you know. But yeah, watching those sort of drivers and just sort of trying to get a technique off them and keeping an eye on what they did every time. I've sort of kept an eye on those top drivers, and yeah, and learnt a lot from that.
You've been rattling off some brilliant names. I was fortunate enough to meet Owen, not that long ago in Queensland, actually. I was just at an Italian restaurant. But Wolford and those guys, they're history-making drivers, a lot of those guys. The Purdon name and that must have been a fun time to be growing up and being so closely, I suppose, associated with all those great drivers.
Yeah, it was, and getting associated with the Purdon family. Roy's brother Les, he was a great driver too and a great horseman. I drove a lot for him and watched him drive earlier on too. He took a lot of horses to America and that sort of thing. But it was a great era for horsemen back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and that, as you know, and it still is. But as you get older, you don't notice them so much.
Who would you say you modelled yourself on? Like we all mimic, I suppose, someone. You might have probably refined it and changed it a little bit over the journey. But when you're starting out, you always want to be someone. You've rattled all these names off. Was there one name in particular that you wanted to be model yourself on?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's probably the likes of Peter Wolford, and you're nowhere near as good as him. But in saying that, I sort of watched him all the time and just sort of got that, just tried to emulate him a fraction, and you were going to drive winners if you could.
What was his greatest attribute, if you like, Peter Wolford's?
It's probably his attitude was great. He's sort of pretty relaxed sort of a driver, and and just a great driver. Put a horse in the race at the right time, and great on the pace, knowing the pace and rating the horse in front and all that sort of thing. And saying that, Tommy Knowles was a very, very good little driver too, and so any of those guys. But I had a lot of good schooling fellas to watch.
Oh, you have. As I said, you're just rattling them off. Do you remember? Do you remember your first winner?
Oh yeah. It was for that chap I just said, Len Bayer. He had a fair few drives, and he drove a little mare there. She sat parked all the way and won by a nose, I think, and beat Les Purdon that night right on the line. So I know you certainly remember the first one.
Did you? Can you remember that night? Like, was it the satisfaction afterwards, or was it satisfaction, elation?
Well, it was only a nose. I wasn't too sure for a while. I didn't want to get too excited. So it was. You still feel it, really. I think, and you still remember it anyway.
Remember, like when you first, I suppose, start, if you like when you sort of said, "Hey, I really fit in here with these big boys." Do you remember the first couple of races or something where things? I'm giving you a bit of thinking time, but where you thought maybe, "Hey, I do belong in the big league with these guys."
Well, you hoped you did. I think once you started driving at that better level, it was. You just had to keep improving and not make too many mistakes. And as we know, we'll all make mistakes, but as long as you can reduce the amount, you get winners. And once you're getting winners, everybody wants to give you a chance.
Yeah. I asked you that before. I thought I'll give you a bit of a heads up. Some of the horses that you've been associated with, and I suppose the easiest question, well, not the easiest. I don't think it'd be the easiest answer for you, but who would you say is your best horse that you've been associated with, mainly from a reinsman's point of view?
Yeah. I've been lucky and driven so many great horses, but Chokin always stands out in my mind. He was a great horse, and probably he had everything. He had high speed, he had stamina, and beautiful big guy.
He had the looks too, didn't he? Like he not only could do winning, getting across the line first, and then he had this unique thing that probably once in a generational horses do. They can capture an audience in a unique way.
Yeah, he had that about him. He'd always been a good horse, great horse as a young horse, and for a big horse, he just had so much potential.
Yeah. I said one of the other ones I wanted to know is the horse that probably was good to you, that maybe not on the same level as a Chokin or anything along those lines, but is there a horse that I suppose put you on the map, if you like, and a little bit more special to you, perhaps, and the likes of Chokin? It might still be Chokin though.
Yeah, no, probably a horse I owned a half share in with John Seaton, a horse called Bella's Boy. He went to Australia, won a Breeders' Crown. I owned half of him, and at that time we had no money, as you can imagine, and no chance. And he won us between us over 300 and something thousand, and then we sold him on to America later on, and did a great job there. And probably a horse like him. I just sort of started off training really. I think Mark had more or less just shifted down south, so I was training on my own. It was one of the early parts, and he's a great young horse, and owning half of him was unbelievable.
Would have been hard to, I suppose, sell him and move him on.
We got a pretty good offer, and and like you say, we didn't have a lot of money in those days, so it was one of those decisions that John Seaton helped. He said, well, so he may help make the decision.
you moved on into the training ranks, and you're going. I think you've trained over 1,000 winners as a trainer as well. Do you enjoy the training?
At times. Yeah, no, it can be very satisfying. Yeah, as you can imagine, you buy a horse from the yearling sales, or you breed a horse and you bring it right through to win races, and it mightn't be a champion, but just winning races and getting the best out of it. And yeah, no, it is great. And like I say, you put a lot more into it, rather than just going and driving a horse and hopping in the cart on race night, and put a lot more time and thought into when you're training them. And yeah, it can make you go grey.
So yeah, well, lucky you got that option. I saw you the other night at Cambridge, and I mean, you take a lot of pride in your horses too. I saw them actually unloading off the truck, and each horse comes off, you run an eye over them and all the rest. You really do take pride in your training, don't you?
Yeah, well, we try to, and it's probably come from the fellas I work for, and the likes of Arnie Gadsby and Roy Purden and Mark and Barry and those sort of guys, just working for them and working with them, and just, yeah, it's all down to detail, as you know, and they were unbelievably good at it.
Only two more questions, I promise. Iceman was always your nickname, if you like, and I had a great association with Gavin Lang, and he was sort of always the Iceman as well. There was probably two questions in this. One of this, the second to last one. Your association with Gavin and the likes, but did you enjoy also being called the Iceman? Like, is it something that you wore with pride, or did it actually put pressure on you to, I suppose, be colder and colder every time you drove a horse?
No, it's something that just sort of happened as we drove along, and I used to come with a late run with a few of them, and similar to Gavin Lang, and get up luckily enough on the line with a few of them, and yeah, so they sort of started using that name, and it didn't worry me. One of my sons used to call me Ice Block, so Iceman was better.
And your association with Gavin, I mean, I know you guys were mates. Did you used to compare notes, if you like, when you sit back and just sort of swoop?
Yeah, no, we ended up being pretty good mates, me and Gavin. When I was over there with horses and that, we'd always ring up and we'd go out for dinner and that with his partner at the time, and Nicole and Molly Melander, they were staying just up the road, so we'd always catch up every time we went over. I think I always paid the bill.
Yeah, that'd be right. History was pretty good at that. Don't worry about that. Just the last one. You enjoy the industry. You sort of like, I mean, you're going to turn around and say, well, I don't know anything else. But I mean, the way the industry changes, you said there before about how hard it was to get it going. Now, you just see now there's so many young people, there's so many young girls in the industry. I think it's so great. And they're like, do you enjoy it?
Yeah, you wouldn't do it if you didn't enjoy it. And just working with the horses, like, it's not a monetary thing. I've been lucky enough to have made a good living out of it and what have you, but there was nothing else I wanted to do. As work outside and work with animals was the two options I sort of felt like I wanted to do, and I was lucky enough to do a job all my life now that I've loved.
Yeah. You look at Dexter Dunn, what he's been able to achieve in America and that. Did you ever think, was that ever on the radar for Tony to maybe do an overseas stint?
No, it wasn't. No, I'm quite happy being at home, but every Kiwi has to be proud of Dexter and all the boys that go to Aussie and train and drive over there as well. It's not easy, and the McCarthy boys up in the States here too, they've done a phenomenal job, but so have a lot of our trainers up there too, the Noel Dailies and Brett Pelling and Nifty Norman. They've been sensational up there, so which is great. They're good horsemen and they come from way down here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think they do a great job. When you see the numbers of winners they have, though, it's mind-boggling. I think Timmy Tetrick the other day drove past 7,000 as well, so it's pretty amazing what they are able to do, but different lifestyle. Not far off getting underway for the next race, mate. We spoke for a fair while, Tone. Thank you very much. Congratulations on everything you've achieved in the industry, and keep up the good work. Hopefully I'll come back and interview you after you've driven 4,000, mate.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks very much.
Thanks, man.